In the last segment, we discussed Prime Minister Trudeau's comments and his lack of apology. We will continue talking a little bit about how the Jewish members of parliament dealt with this issue. We saw Member of Parliament Lantsman talking in regards to how she was feeling about the Prime Minister's comment. We had a number of non-Jewish members of Parliament standing up for her and speaking out for their own reasons. But then we also had a Liberal Member of Parliament who stood up and tried to almost defend, or at least set aside, what Prime Minister Trudeau said. This is Member of Parliament Karina Gould. She is a Liberal and obviously on the same side as the Prime Minister. And this is after the Prime Minister had left. She decided to speak up and say this.
Speaker, emotions are obviously running very high right now, and I think it's incumbent on all of us to take a step back and reflect on what the values of this House are. I am also a proud Jewish woman who is the descendant of Holocaust survivors, and my family found refuge and support and a life in this country. And Mr. Speaker, we must listen to each other, and we must assure that no one in this House is standing with those who support white supremacy, who support Nazi views, who look to contribute and enable racist views. And Mr. Speaker, I would ask that all of us in this House use our words judiciously.
What is obviously happening here is this Member of Parliament is trying to avoid the issue of the Prime Minister not apologizing. She, of course, is not standing up for him necessarily either. But what interests me most is the fact that it seems like she started her speech by identifying herself, obviously, as a Jewish person, but also as the descendant of Holocaust survivors. And I wonder if this was meant to be some sort of credibility. So she can speak, obviously, as someone who understands this situation by identifying herself as Jewish. There were another bunch of conservative members of parliament who also spoke up and identified themselves either as descendants of Holocaust survivors or Jews or having some distant relatives that were Jewish. And I just found it a little bit awkward to watch a parliamentary back and forth where sort of people were comparing their connection to Judaism to speak on this issue. I guess what makes it so uncomfortable is knowing, as Emily had said in the first segment, that it is very difficult to come out and use your Judaism as some sort of credibility because, of course, that comes along with whatever stigmas that people have against Jews. So all of these people standing up really does kind of make you cringe a little bit. Like, why does Judaism have to do with any of this stuff? The fact of the matter is, and one reason why I think that the Member of Parliament didn't stand up and officially condone the message given by the Prime Minister, is that this issue really doesn't have much to do with Jews and more of an unparliamentary situation. Jewish people who are in government should be treated the same way as everybody in government. Everyone should be free of feeling discriminated against or belittled or mocked or discriminated against or singled out. And as we heard in the first segment, there was a gentleman from Alberta whose connection to World War II and the Nazis was very different than the Jewish experience, but still too felt very emotional about the issue. So I understand why Miss Lantsman had asked for the apology. Of course, her being the one who was initially sort of targeted with the statement, but the follow-up with other members of the parliament talking about their Jewish connections in various ways just, I think, was sort of unnecessary and I think felt a little bit uneasy. All of Miss Lantsman's colleagues that stood up to try and support her and show their support for her wanting an apology definitely was necessary and very much expected from our leaders in Canada. But one thing I would say is that maybe they didn't need to add the "I'm Jewish, so I have something to say about this" line. I think that just being people who are in parliament, everybody should have expected better from the Prime Minister, and not only the ones who are Jewish and had to identify themselves as being Jewish in order to get credibility to speak out against the Prime Minister. I guess that kind of leaves us with the question, Can anyone speak out in favor of Miss Lantsman and her request for an apology, or does this person have to be Jewish or have some sort of skin in the game, for lack of a better word? And on the other side of that coin, if a person on the liberal side identifies themselves as Jewish and seems to have no issue with the things that were said by the Prime Minister, does that somehow go against what the other side is feeling? Do we as Jews set the policy for what counts as inappropriate or appropriate? And if so, what happens when there are differing opinions? In the end, I think all politicians should be held up to the same standard no matter what their background is. And I think that this situation was definitely blown very far out of proportion once the Prime Minister refused to apologize. I am always left with the question that Jewish people, for some reason, have to watch out and balance their background along with their politics, because everything is seen through this lens of Jewish people being only conservative or only liberal, or Jewish people only concerning themselves with other states or people like themselves. And it's just really unfortunate to see that sometimes our identity can kind of be weighed up against our politics. I'm really not sure if we see this in any other culture, background, or nationality. In future episodes, hopefully we'll get a chance to look a little bit more into Jews in politics and running for politics. But that's the end of this episode. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Don't forget to check us out on social media at jdr.podcast. Thank you for all of you who've already started following. You can find some cool content down there, new and upcoming stories. This has been another episode of the Jewish Diaspora Report. We'll see you next time.